Hey guys, it's Thursday. Oh, Jen, thank you. Your video yesterday actually reminded me of what I was going to make Ishin do, so thank you for that. So, we'll start off. Ishin, your punishment is, you're getting Facebook. That's your punishment. It seems a silly punishment, but it is your punishment nonetheless. So there. Punished. Okay, so once again, I find myself slightly preoccupied with schoolwork to have come up with a decent or a good video. I decided I'm not going to do the speech. So yeah, I really didn't like this how I ended up doing the speech. I already did the speech. Yeah, I don't think it's quite good for the vlog. And I haven't gotten a call back from the library yet, so I'm guessing the book's not in yet, so I can't do the punishment. But it did get me thinking, as long as I'm here, I might as well read 10 chapters of something. So, for my American Prose Classic, they're having me read this book here, The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. So, I thought I might as well read the first 10 pages of something, so I decided I'd read the first 10 pages of this book, The Namesake, Jhumpa Lahiri. Chapter 1. 1968. On a sticky August evening, 2 weeks before her due date, Ashima Ganguly stands in the kitchen of a Central Square apartment, combining Rice Krispies and planter peanuts and chopped red onion in a bowl. She adds salt, lemon juice, thin slices of green chili peppers, wishing there were mustard oil or to pour into the mix. Ashima has been consuming this concoction throughout her pregnancy, a humble approximation of the snacks sold for pennies at Calcutta's sidewalks on the railway platforms throughout India. Spilling from newspaper cones. Even now, there are barely space inside her. It is the only thing she craves. Tasting the cupped palm. Where is it? Tasting from a cupped palm, she frowns as usual. There's something missing. She stares blankly at the pegboard behind the countertop where her cooking utensils hang, slightly coated with grease. She wipes sweat from her face with the free end of her sari. Her swollen feet ache against speckled gray linoleum. Her pelvis aches from baby weight. She opens a cupboard, the shelves lined with the grimy yellow and white checkered pattern she's been meaning to replace, and reaches for another onion. Frowning again, she pulls at its crisp magenta skin. A curious warmth floods her abdomen, followed by a tightening so severe she doubles over, gasping without a sound, dropping the onion with a thud to the floor. The sensation passes, only to be followed by more enduring spasms of discomfort. In the bathroom, she discovers on her underpants a solid streak of brownish blood. She calls out to her husband, Ashoke, a doctoral candidate in electrical engineering at MIT, who is studying in the bedroom. He leans over a card table, the edge of their bed, two twin mattresses pushed together under a red and purple Baltic spread, serves as his chair. When she calls out to Ashoke, she does not say his name. Ashima never thinks of her husband's name when she's thinking of her husband, even though she knows perfectly well what it is. She has adopted his surname, but refuses for propriety's sake to utter his first. It's not the type of thing Bengali wives do. Like a kiss or caress in a Hindu movie, a husband's name is something intimate and therefore unspoken, cleverly patched over, and so instead of saying Ashoke's name, she utters the interrogative that has come to replace it, which translates roughly as, "Are you listening to me?" At dawn, a taxi is called to ferry them through deserted Cambridge streets, up Massachusetts Avenue, past Harvard Yard, to Mount Auburn Hospital. Ashima registers answering questions about the frequency and duration of contractions. As Ashoke fills out the forms, she is seated in a wheelchair and pushed through the shiny, brightly colored corridors, whisked into an elevator more spacious than her kitchen. On the maternity floor, she is assigned a bed with a window in a room at the end of the hall. She is asked to remove her Mushirabad silk sari in favor of a flowered cotton gown that, to her mild embarrassment, only reaches her knees. A nurse offers to fold the sari, but exasperated by the thick slippery yards, ends up stuffing the material into Ashima's blue suitcase. Her obstetrician, Dr. Ashley, dauntingly handsome in the Lord Mountbatten sort of way, with fine sand-colored hair sweeps back from his temples, arrives to examine her progress. The baby's head is properly positioned, has already begun to descend. She is told that she is still in early labor, 3 centimeters dilated, beginning to efface. "What does it mean, dilated?" she asked. And Dr. Ashley holds up 2 fingers side by side, then draws them apart, explaining the unimaginable thing to her body must do in order for the baby to pass. The process will take some time, Dr. Ashley tells her, given that this is her first pregnancy. Labor can take 24 hours, sometimes more. She searches for Ashoke's face, but he has stepped behind the curtain the doctor has drawn. "I'll be back," Ashoke says to her in Bengali. And then a nurse adds, "Don't worry, Miss Ganguly. She's got a long ways to go. We'll take care of her over here." Now she is alone, cut off by curtains from the 3 other women in the bedroom. One woman's name, she gathers from bits of conversation, is Beverly. Another is Lois. Carol lies to her left. "God damn it! God damn it! God damn you! This is hell," she hears one of them say. And then a man's voice, "I love you, sweetheart." Words Ashima has neither heard nor expects to hear from her own husband. This is not how they are. It is the first time in her life she has slept alone, surrounded by strangers. All her life she has slept in either a room with her parents or with Ashoke at her side. She wishes the curtains were open, so that she could talk to the American women. Perhaps one of them has given birth before, who can tell her exactly what to expect. But she has gathered that Americans, in spite of their public declarations of affection, in spite of their miniskirts and bikinis, in spite of their hand-holding on the streets and lying on top of each other on the Cambridge Commons, prefer their privacy. She spreads her fingers over the taut, enormous drum her middle has become, wondering where the baby's feet and hands are at this moment. The child is no longer restless. For the past few days, apart from the occasional flutters, she has not felt it punch or kick, or press against her ribs. She wonders if it's the only Indian person in the hospital, but a gentle twitch from her baby reminds her that she is, technically speaking, not alone. Ashima thinks it's strange that her child will be born in a place most people enter either to suffer or to die. There is nothing to comfort her in the off-white tiles of the floor, the off-white panels of the ceiling, the white sheets tucked tightly into the bed. In India, she thinks to herself, women go home to their parents to give birth, away from husbands and in-laws, and household cares, retreating briefly to childhood when the baby arrives. Another contraction begins, more violent than the last. She cries out, pressing her head against the pillow. Her fingertips grip the chilly rails of the bed. No one hears her. No nurse rushes to her side. She has been instructed to time the durations of the contractions, and so she consults her watch and a bon voyage gift from her parents, slipped over her wrist the last time she saw them, amid airport confusion and tears. It wasn't until she was on a plane, flying for the first time in her life on a BOAC VC-10, whose deafening ascent 26 members of her family were watching from the balcony at Dum Dum Airport, as she was drifted over the parts of India she has never set foot in. And even her father, outside India himself, that she notices watching the morning cavalcade of matrimonial bracelets on both her arms, iron, gold, coral, conch. Now in addition she wears a plastic bracelet with a typed label identifying her as a patient of the hospital. She keeps the watch free, turned to its side of her wrist. On the back, surrounded by the words waterproof, anti-magnetic, and shock protected, her marital initials AG are inscribed. American seconds tick on the top of her pulse point. For half a minute, A band of pain wraps around her stomach, radiating toward her back and shooting down her legs. And then, again, relief. She calculates in Indian time on her hands. The tip of her thumb strikes each rung of the brown ladders etched into her thumbs. The tips of her thumbs strike each rung of the brown ladders etched into the back of her skin, then stops at the middle of the third. It is 9.5 hours ahead in Calcutta. Already evening 8:30. In the kitchen of her parents' flat on Amherst Street, at this very moment, a servant is pouring after-dinner tea into steaming glasses, arranging Murray biscuits on a tray. Her mother, very soon to be grandmother, is standing at the mirror at the dressing table, untangling waist-length hair, still more black than grey, with her fingers. Her father, hunched over his slanted ink table by the window, sketching, smoking, listening to the voice of America. Her younger brother, Rana, studies for a physics exam on the bed. She pictures clearly the grey cement floors of her parents' sitting room, feels its solid chill underfoot even on the hottest days. An enormous black-and-white photograph of her deceased paternal grandfather looms at one end against the pink-plastered wall. Opposite, an alcove shielding by clouded panes of glass is stuffed with books and papers of her father's watercolor tins. For an instant, the weight of the baby vanishes, replaced by a sense that passes before her eyes, only to replace once more by a blue strip of the Charles River, thick green treetops, cars gliding up and down Memorial Drive. In Cambridge, it is 11 in the morning, already lunchtime in the hospital's accelerated day. A tray holding warm apple juice, Jell-O ice cream, and a cold baked chicken is brought to her side. Patty, a friendly nurse with a diamond engagement ring and a fringe of reddish hair beneath her cap, tells Ashima to consume only the Jell-O and the apple juice. It's just as well. Ashima would not have touched the chicken, even if permitted. Americans eat their chicken in its skins, though Ashima has recently found a kind butcher on Prospect Street, willing to pull it off for her. Patty comes to fluff the pillows, and tidy the bed. Dr. Ashley pokes his head from time to time. No need to worry, he chirps, putting the stethoscope to Ashima's belly, patting her hand, admiring her various braces. Everything is looking perfectly normal. We are expecting a perfectly normal delivery, Mrs. Ganguly. But nothing feels normal to Ashima. For the past 18 months, ever since she's arrived in Cambridge, nothing has felt normal at all. It's not so much the pain, which she knows somehow she will survive, it is the consequence. Motherhood in a foreign land. For it is the one thing to be pregnant, to suffer the queasy mornings in bed, the sleepless nights, the dull throbbing in her back, the countless visits to the bathroom. Throughout the experience, in spite of her growing discomfort, she has become astonished by her body's ability to make life, exactly as her mother and grandmother and all the great-grandmothers have done. That is what is happening so far from home, unmonitored and unobserved by those she loved. It made it more miraculous still, but she is terrified to raise a child in a country where she is related to no one, where she knows so little, where life seems so tentative and spare. How about a little walk? It might do you good, Patty asks, when she comes to clear the lunch tray. Ashima looks up from the tattered copy of Desh magazine that she had brought to read on her plane ride to Boston, and still cannot bring herself to throw away. The printed pages of the Bengali type, slightly rough to the touch, are a perpetual comfort to her. She's read each of the short stories and poems and articles a dozen times. There is a pen and ink drawing on page 11 by her father, an illustrator for the magazine. A view of the North Calcutta skyline sketched from the roof of their flat one foggy January morning. She stood behind her father as he'd drawn it, watching as he crouched over the easel, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his shoulders wrapped in a blank cashmere shawl. Yes, all right, Ashima says. Patty helps Ashima out of the bed, tucks her feet one by one into slippers, drapes the second nightgown around her shoulders. Just think, Patty says as Ashima struggles to stand. In a day or two you will be half that size. She takes Ashima's arms and they step out of the room into the hallway. After a few feet, Ashima stops. Her leg trembles, and another wave of pain surges through her body. She shakes her head, and her eyes filling with tears. I cannot. You can. Squeeze my hand. Squeeze it as tight as you'd like. After a minute, they continue on, towards the nurse's station. Hoping for a boy or a girl, Patty asks. As long as there are 10 finger and 10 toe, Ashima replies. For these anatomical details, these particular signs of life, are the ones she is most difficult picturing when she imagines the baby in her arms. Patty smiles, a little too wildly, and then suddenly realizes her error. She knows she should have said fingers and toes. This error pains her almost as much as her last contraction. English had been her subject. In Calcutta before she was married, she was working toward a college degree. She used to tutor neighborhood school children in their homes, on their verandas and beds, helping them to memorize Tennyson and Wordsworth, to pronounce words like sign and cough, to understand the difference between Aristotelian and Shakespearean tragedies. But in Bengali, a finger can also mean fingers, and toe, toes. It had been after tutoring one day that Ashima's mother had met her at the door, told her to go straight to the bedroom and prepare herself. A man was waiting to see her. He was the third in as many months. The first had been a widower with 4 children. The second, a newspaper cartoonist who knew her father, had been hit by a bus in Espeland and lost his left arm. To her great relief, they had both rejected her. She was 19, in the middle of her studies, in no rush to be a bride, and so obediently but without expectation she had untangled and rebraided her hair, wiped away the coal that had been smudged below her eye, painted some circura flowers from the velvet puff of her skin. The sheer parrot green sari she pleated and tucked under her petticoat had been laid out for her on the bed by her mother. Before entering the sitting room, Ashima had paused at the corridor. She could hear her mother saying, "She is fond of cooking, and she can knit extremely well. Within a week she finished this cardigan I am wearing." Ashima smiled, amused by her mother's salesmanship. It had taken her a better part of a year to finish the cardigan, and still her mother had to do the sleeves. Glancing at the floor where the visitors customarily removed their slippers, she noticed, beside 2 sets of chapalas, a pair of men's shoes that were not like any she had ever seen on the streets and trams and buses of Calcutta, or even in the windows of Bata. They were brown shoes with black heels and off-white laces and stitching. There was a band of lentil-sized holes embossed on either side of each shoe, and at the tips there was a pretty pattern pricked into the leather, as if with a needle. Looking more closely, she saw that the shoemaker's name written in the initials in gold lettering that had all but faded. "Something and Sons," it said. She saw the size 8.5 and the initials USA. And as her mother continued to sing her praises, Ashima, unable to resist the sudden and overwhelming urge, stepped into the shoes at her feet. Lingering sweat from the owner's feet mingled with hers, causing her heart to race. It was the closest thing she had ever experienced to the touch of a man. The leather had creased, heavy, and still warm. On the left shoe she had noticed that one of the cross-stitched crossing laces had missed a hole, and the oversight set her at ease. She extracted her feet and entered the room. The man was sitting at a rattan chair, his parents perched on the edge of a twin bed where her brother slept at night. He had slightly plump, scholarly looking but still youthful, with black thick-framed glasses and a sharp, prominent nose. A neatly trimmed mustache connected to a beard that covered only his chin lent him an elegant, vaguely aristocratic air. He wore brown socks and brown trousers and a green and white striped shirt, and was staring glumly at his knees. He did not look up when she appeared, though she was aware that his gaze as she crossed the room. By the time she had managed to steal another look at him, he was once again indifferent and focused on his knees. He cleared his throat as if to speak, but then said nothing. Instead, it was his father who did the talking, saying he was a man, that the man had gone to St. Xavier's, and then B.E. College, graduating first from both institutions. Ashima took her seat and smoothed the pleats of her sari. She sensed her mother eyeing her with approval. Ashima was 5 feet 4 inches, tall for a Bengali woman, 99 pounds. Her complexion was on the dark side of fair, but she had been compared on more than one occasion to the actress Madhabi Makaruji. Her nails were admirably long, her fingers, like her father's, artistically slim. They inquired after her studies, and she was asked to recite a few stanzas from The Daffodils. The man's family lived in Alipur. The father was a labor officer for the customs department of a shipping company. My son has been living abroad for 2 years, the man's father said, earning a PhD in Boston, researching in the field of fiber optics. Ashima had never heard of Boston or of fiber optics. She was asked whether she was willing to fly on a plane if she was capable of living in a city characterized by severe snowy winters alone. "Won't he be there?" she asked, pointing to the man whose shoes she'd briefly occupied, but had yet to say a word to her. It was only after the betrothal that she'd learned his name. 1 week later, the invitations were printed, and 2 weeks after that, she was adorned and adjusted by countless aunts, countless cousins hovering around her. These were her last moments as Ashima Bahaduri, before becoming Ashima Ganguly. Her lips were darkened, her brows and cheeks dotted with sandalwood paste, her hair wound up, bound with flowers, held in place by hundreds of wire pins that would take an hour to remove once the wedding was finally over. Her head was draped in scarlet netting. The air was damp, and in spite of the pins, Ashima's hair, thickest of all the cousins, would not lie flat. She wore all the necklaces and chokers and bracelets that were destined to live most of her lives in an extra-large safety deposit box in a bank in New England. At the designated hour, she was seated on a pieri that her father had decorated, hoisted 5 feet off the ground, carried off to meet the groom. She had hidden her face with a heart-shaped betel leaf, kept her head bent and low until she had circled him 7 times. 8,000 miles away in Cambridge, she has come to know him. In the evening she cooks for him, hoping to please with the unrationed, remarkably unblemished sugar, flour, rice, and salt she had written about to her mother the very first letter home. By now she has learned that her husband likes his food on the salty side, and that his favorite thing about lamb curry is the potatoes, and he likes to finish his dinner with a small helping of rice and dal. At night, lying beside her in bed, he listens to her describe the events of her day, her walks along Massachusetts Avenue, the shops she visits, the Hare Krishnas who pester her with their leaflets, the pistachio ice cream cones she treats herself to in Harvard Square. In spite of his meager graduate student wages, he sets aside money to send every few months to his father to help put an expansion on his parents' house. He is fastidious about his clothing. Their first argument had been over a sweater she'd shrunk in the washing machine. As soon as he comes home from the university, the first thing he does is hang up his shirt and trousers, donning a pair of drawstring pajamas and a pullover if it's cold. On Sundays, he spends an hour occupied with tins of shoe polish and his 3 pairs of shoes, 2 black and 1 brown. The brown ones are the ones he'd been wearing when he'd first come to see her. The sight of him cross-legged on newspaper spread on the floor, intently whisking a brush over the letter, always reminds her of the indiscretions in her parents' corridor. It is a moment that shocks her still, and she prefers, in spite of all she tells him at night about the life they now share, to keep it to herself. Okay, well, that is first 10 pages. That's all I have time for today. I gotta go get back to some schoolwork. So that is it for me, strangers, and I will see you next Thursday.